In 1866, Prussia and Austria fought a war over the leadership of the German Confederation. After 2 months and 20,000 deaths, Prussia came out victorious and dissolved the German Confederation to form their own Northern German Confederation. Over in France, the French wanted to take advantage of what they assumed to be a weak nation and declared war. Prussia was once again victorious, and the war ended with the capture of Paris. Another major result of the war was the formation of the German Empire in January 1871, with Prussian King Wilhelm as its emperor. The newly formed state did not only get their first emperor, alongside him also came his wife Augusta as the first German Empress. Maria Louise Augusta Catherine was born on September 30th, 1811, as the third child of her parents. Her father was Charles Frederick, the Grand Duke of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach, and her mother was the Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna of Russia. Through her mother, she was therefore a niece to Russian Tsar Alexander I and Nicholas I. Augusta, as she is commonly referred to, grew up under the care of her German nanny. She would go on to learn English, French, Russian, and Latin. In addition, the young princess was educated in math, geography, religion, history, dance, painting, writing, and music. Famous poet Goethe himself was responsible for the education of Augusta. In later years, Augusta would remember him as one of her dearest and best friends. Augusta's mother, Grand Duchess Maria, was keen on marrying her 2 daughters to Prussian princes. The reason for this lies in the geographic location of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach. At many points, the Grand Duchy shared borders with Prussia, who increasingly became a threat towards them. She managed to marry off Augusta's elder sister, who was also named Maria, to Prince Karl of Prussia, the 3rd son of the King of Prussia. Augusta was set to marry his 2nd son named Wilhelm. She met him in 1826, when he was 29 and she was only 15. Wilhelm thought Augusta had an excellent personality, but was less attractive than her sister Maria. However, the 29-year-old Wilhelm was not really interested in marrying Augusta, as he had a keen interest in the Polish princess and his cousin Eliza Radziwiłł. He had known her since her childhood, as she was the daughter of his aunt. However, due to her Polish ancestors, Eliza was deemed not of equal rank, and Wilhelm was pressured into making a dynastic marriage. Wilhelm was not the eldest son of his father and therefore not the heir, but his elder brother had been married for a few years at that point without being able to produce an heir himself. It was therefore expected that Wilhelm would one day succeed his brother to the Prussian throne. The wedding of Augusta and Wilhelm followed on June 11, 1829. At that point, Augusta was only 17. The first few weeks of their marriage were harmonious, but Augusta noticed that her husband still thought of his first love, Eliza. Soon the court life in Prussia became boring for the young princess. Augusta was especially interested in politics and had liberal views, which made her quickly unpopular at the strict and conservative Prussian court. She was an active supporter of a constitutional monarchy for Prussia, a trait she most likely inherited from her grandfather, who gave his duchy a constitution in 1816. 3 years after their wedding, Augusta gave birth to their first child, Frederick. Augusta took great interest in Frederick's education and made sure to pass on her liberal views to her son. It would take 7 more years until the princess gave birth to her second child, Louise. Augusta was pregnant 2 more times in 1842 and 1843, but lost both babies during pregnancy. During the 1840s, it became clear that Augusta's brother-in-law, Frederick William IV, would remain childless. Her husband Wilhelm was therefore the heir presumptive to the Prussian throne. As wife to the heir presumptive, Augusta continued to spread her liberal views. She made good friends with British Queen Victoria, who agreed that Prussia should move away from their conservative image. Queen Victoria and Augusta would remain lifelong friends and exchange letters frequently. Following the Revolution of 1848, Wilhelm, who was deemed responsible for the many deaths during the March Revolution, was forced into exile. Augusta and her 2 children remained in Prussia but moved to Potsdam. Augusta demanded reforms and wrote to her exiled husband that it was more important than ever to save the monarchy. Frederick William IV agreed to issue reforms, and plans to force his abdication were forfeited. Eventually, Wilhelm was allowed to return and was appointed Governor-General of the Rhine province. The family moved to Koblenz, where they settled in the Electoral Palace. Augusta enjoyed the life in Koblenz as she was far away from the strict court life of Berlin. As a result, many liberal-minded contemporaries began to travel to Koblenz. In 1856, Augusta and Wilhelm's 17-year-old daughter Louise married the Grand Duke of Baden, Frederick. 2 years later, the marriage of her son to the British Princess Victoria followed. Augusta, who frequently exchanged letters with Queen Victoria, had arranged a marriage between her son and the Princess Royal. She hoped to strengthen the ties between the Prussian and British court. Despite Augusta's lifelong friendship with Queen Victoria, the one with her daughter, the now wife of her son, was rather cold. In the fall of 1858, Augusta's brother-in-law had a series of strokes and was unable to rule. Her husband Wilhelm therefore took over regency and they returned to Berlin. 3 years later, in 1861, Wilhelm became King of Prussia, with Augusta as his consort. We are now facing the point we were at the beginning of this video. The next few years were marked by wars fought by Prussia against Austria and France. In 1871, Wilhelm and Augusta became the first German Emperor and Empress. Augusta despised the title of Empress and thought of it to sound more extraordinary than it was in reality. In addition, Augusta had quite some differences with German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, who had played an important role when founding the German Empire. Augusta condemned Bismarck's cultural struggle in which he fought against the Catholics' control of education. She was a supporter of the Pope and wrote many letters to her husband, the Emperor, in which she demanded the end of the so-called Kulturkampf. The struggle lastly came to an end in 1878, and Augusta viewed this as a personal success over Bismarck. Only after these years, Augusta slowly began to bury her differences with Bismarck. She would even call him a genius statesman. Augusta thought of Bismarck to be the best tutor for her beloved grandson, Wilhelm. Only he could prepare Wilhelm for the throne he would one day succeed to. As the younger Wilhelm had a bad relationship with his own mother Victoria, he got closer to his grandmother Augusta. Rumors therefore began to spread that Augusta thought of Wilhelm to be more suitable to the throne than her own son, Frederick. With increasing age, Augusta did not spend as much time at the court in Berlin as she used to. In fact, she only resided there from November to April. The rest of the year was spent in Baden, where she would visit her daughter Louise, and in Koblenz. In 1888, the 70-year-old Empress slipped and fell and was seriously injured. From that point on, she required crutches and a wheelchair. In 1888, her husband Wilhelm died, and only 99 days later, she witnessed the death of her son Frederick. She saw her beloved grandson Wilhelm become the German Emperor. Augusta, who had long suffered from rheumatism, died on January 7, 1890, at the age of 78. She most likely was killed by the so-called Russian flu, which was a pandemic in the years 1889 to 1890. The first German empress was buried beside her husband in Castle Charlottenburg.